The luminous accord hung in the void, like a shard of frozen lightning, its crystalline hull refracting the distant starlight into prismatic fractals. Commander Zapkel of the Zapirian High Fleet watched from the observation spire, his four-jointed fingers resting against the bio-luminescent interface of the command dais. The ship pulsed with the steady rhythm of living energy, veins of teal plasma threading through translucent alloy. It had been cycles since the last contact with an unknown species. The archive spoke of such encounters with caution, reminders of the HFY, the ancient demons who had once scorched the galaxy with fire and teeth. But those were myths, shadows cast by long-dead empires. The human vessel drifting into scanner range was no myth. It was angular, brutal in its construction. No flowing curves, no harmonic geometry, just layered armor plating and blunt, aggressive lines. A warship, unmistakably, but not like the sleek predators of the Galactic Accord. This was something else, something hungry. Scans complete, Commander. Scientist Quilek's voice resonated through the crystalline comms, tinged with unease. Their technology is primitive. Combustion-based propulsion, ferrous alloys, no energy shielding. Zapkel's mandibles twitched. Primitive. That should have been reassuring. But then why did his carapace prickle with instinctive alarm? The human ship hailed them. No elegant light, pulse transmission. Just raw, unfiltered radio waves. A voice barking through static. Zapirian vessel, this is Major Maya Lee of the Terran Defense Force. We come in peace. Zapkel exhaled through his ventral vents. The word was a paradox when spoken from the throat of a predator. He activated the reply channel. His own voice modulated into the human's crude sound. Language. Major Lee, you enter restricted space. State your purpose. A pause. Then, laughter. Short, sharp, human. Trade, she said. We've got something you'll want. On the view screen, a data packet unfurled. A schematic. Quilek hissed, his bioluminescent markings flaring electric blue. Commander, this is... Zapkel saw it. Not just any weapon, their weapon. The design matched the fragments from the HFY ruins, the same spiraling core, the same pulse, frequency. The humans had rebuilt it, not from study, not from theory, from memory. The realization struck like a particle lance. The demons of the archives had not been myths. They had been human, and now they were back. The bridge of the luminous will hummed with the low resonant pulse of crystalline energy cores, their blue-green glow casting shifting patterns across the translucent deck. Zapkel's claws flexed against the command console, the bioluminescent interface pulsing beneath his touch as he studied the human schematic. It was impossible, and yet there it was. The spiraling core, the pulse frequency signature that matched the fragmented records of the HFY cataclysm. The weapon that had shattered worlds, the weapon they had wielded. Quilek's frills trembled, his voice a whisper of static through the neural link. Commander, the harmonics, it's identical. They couldn't have reverse engineered this, not without having built it before. Zapkel silenced the thought before it fully formed. The archive spoke of the Devourers, a species of unmatched ferocity, who had waged war not for territory, not for resources, but for the sheer hunger of conquest. They had been purged, erased, their name struck from history, and now they stood at his doorstep, wrapped in flesh and steel, offering trade. The human vessel, the Vigilance, hung in the void beyond the view screen. Its angular hull, a brutal contrast to the Zapirian fleet's flowing crystalline forms. Scans had already peeled back its outer layers, revealing a warship built for endurance, its armor layered in reactive plating, its weapon ports dark but waiting. Zapkel's secondary eyes flicked to the tactical display. The humans had not powered their primary armaments, a gesture of peace or arrogance. Quilek's claws danced across the analysis console, pulling deeper scans. Then he froze. Commander, their crew signatures. The bio readings spilled across the screen. Zapkel's blood chilled. The humans were wrong. Their vital signs cycled too fast. Their neural activity spiked in erratic bursts. They slept in fragments, healed at impossible speeds, endured radiation levels that would liquefy a Zapirian in minutes. And then there were the others, the ones whose readings didn't match anything in the database, the ones whose heartbeats were slowed, too steady, too controlled. The ones who registered as not entirely organic. Quilex's frills clamped tight to his skull. They've modified themselves. Zapkel exhaled, the air hissing through his vents. The Devourers had not just returned, they had evolved, and they were waiting for his answer. The silence on the luminous Will's command deck was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of crystalline power cores cycling in their organic casings. Zapkel's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a moment, shielding his vision from the invasive blue-green glow of the holographic displays. The data pulsed there, relentless, undeniable. The humans were not as they seemed. Their ship, indomitable. Their transmissions called it, hung in the void before them, a blunt, angular silhouette against the nebula's glow. No curves, no elegance, just layered armor and recessed weapon ports, a thing built for violence. But it was the interior that unsettled him. The crew Quilex's claws trembled as he adjusted the bioscanners, refining the readings. The humans' vitals were wrong. Their heart rates oscillated between frenetic and unnervingly slow. Some registered neural spikes that suggested hyper-awareness, while others, the modified ones, showed patterns so controlled, they bordered on machine. Like Zapkel's frills twitched, the archives had spoken of this. The Devourers, a myth, a cautionary tale from the first expansion, when the Zapirian ancestors had fled something they could not name. A species that consumed worlds, not for resources, but for the act itself. A species that changed itself to fit the hunger. And now they were here. Quilex's voice was a whisper. Commander, their transmission. They're hailing us again. Zapkel forced his vents to steady. The human commander's face materialized in the holodisplay, smooth-skinned, symmetrical, deceptively fragile. Major Maya Lee, her designation read. Her lips moved, but the translation matrix lagged, stretching the silence. Then the words came. Zapirian vessel. This is Major Lee of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We appreciate your patience. We'd like to discuss terms. Terms, not trade, not alliance. Zapkel's claws flexed against the command console. The humans knew. They had to know. Their scans would have revealed the luminous Will's limited armaments, the outdated shielding. They saw weakness. The Major's expression shifted. Not a smile, not quite. Something sharper. We understand hesitation, but we're not here to repeat history. A chill slithered down Zapkel's spine. Repeat history, as if they knew exactly what the archives said about them. Quilex's frills flattened. They're lying. Zapkel exhaled slowly. Of course they were. The Devourers had always lied. But this time, they were lying politely. And that was far more terrifying. The luminous will hung in the void like a shard of frozen lightning, its crystalline hull pulsing with uneasy energy. Zapkel's claws traced the hexagonal patterns of the command console, each groove a reminder of the ship's fragility. The human vessel, indomitable. Their scans had named it, loomed on the view screen, a blunt angular shadow against the stars. No elegant curves, no shimmering bioluminescence, just layered armor and the cold dead gleam of reinforced steel. Quilex's frills twitched as he parsed the latest data stream. Their power signatures don't match anything in the archives, he murmured, mandibles clicking in agitation. No plasma cores, no organic energy matrices, just fusion reactors. Primitive, too primitive. Zapkel's third eyelid flicked sideways, adjusting the display's magnification. The human ship's hull was pockmarked. not with battle scars, but with something worse. Intentional wear, gouges where armor had been stripped and replaced, welds where weapons had been upgraded. This wasn't a relic. It was a predator that had chewed through its own restraints. A chime sounded another transmission. The human commander's face filled the screen, her dark eyes unreadable. "We've analyzed your historical records," Major Lee said. No lag this time, the translation was seamless. "The species you called Devourers, their last recorded conflict with your people was Fei years ago, correct?" Quilek's frills clamped shut. Zapkel forced his spines to remain neutral. "Your point, Major?" Lee tilted her head, just slightly. "Genetic sequencing doesn't lie. We share Fei of their DNA." The bridge's ambient glow dimmed, as if the ship itself recoiled. Then Lee's lips curved, not a smile, a baring of teeth. "But we're not them. They ate civilizations, we just outlast them." The screen went dark. Quilek exhaled in a rush. "They're taunting us." Zapkel stared at the now empty view screen, testing. And the worst part, the humans were right. The Devourers had been monsters, but monsters could be killed. What did that make these creatures? The crystalline walls of the luminous were pulsed with uneasy light, their usual rhythmic glow now erratic, like the heartbeat of a wounded beast. Zapkel stood motionless before the darkened view screen, his talons flexing against the command console's smooth luminescent surface. The humans had severed the transmission, leaving behind only the echo of their words and the weight of their revelation, Fei genetic match. Quilek's frills trembled as he scrolled through the data streams flooding the bridge's holographic displays. The ancient archives flickered to life, projecting fragmented records of the Devourers, towering figures armored in chitinous plating, their warships like jagged teeth tearing through the void. The resemblance was undeniable. The same sharp angles in their technology, the same relentless efficiency in their conquests. But the humans were different. They had not come with fire and hunger. They had come with knowledge. Zapkel's mandibles tightened. The Devourers had been a storm, devouring worlds in their path, leaving behind only husks and echoes of civilizations. The humans, though, they had studied. They had waited. They had learned. And now they stood before the Zapirian dominion, not as conquerors, but as heirs. A low chime resonated through the bridge as the ship's AI processed the implications. The tactical display shimmered, overlaying the human fleet's positions, a formation too precise, too controlled to be the work of mindless predators. Their vessels were sleek, their armor layered with adaptive alloys that shimmered under scan, absorbing and redistributing energy like living tissue. Quilek's voice was barely a whisper. "They've had 12 millennia to evolve, to refine." Zapkel didn't answer. His gaze locked onto the flagship, indomitable. The humans called it, a name that was not a boast, but a statement. Then the screen reactivated, not with Major Lee's face, with coordinates, a star system deep in the outer rim, a graveyard, the wreckage of a devourer hive, fleet, shattered and lifeless, orbited a dead sun, and beside it, a single transmission, looping endlessly, a human voice. "We ended them. Now, we offer you the same choice they refused." The message repeated. Zapkel exhaled, his spines flattening against his back. The humans had not come to negotiate. They had come to deliver terms, and the Dominion had until dawn to answer. The silence in the command nexus was absolute. Zapkel's claws flexed against the crystalline console, the bioluminescent interface pulsing beneath his touch like a slow, panicked heartbeat. The image of the Devourer graveyard hung before them, twisted wrecks of chitinous dreadnoughts. Their organic spires snapped like brittle bone. Their once terrifying weapons reduced to frozen husks drifting in the void. Quilek's mandibles twitched, his antennae rigid with disbelief. The Devourers were not just extinct, they had been erased, and the humans had done it. The Dominion's archives spoke of the Devourers in hushed, reverent terror, a scourge that had consumed entire civilizations, leaving behind only skeletal husks of worlds. Their fleets were unstoppable, their tactics merciless. The Dominion had barely survived their last incursion 12,000 cycles ago, and even then, it had cost them half their species. Yet here, now, the humans had reduced them to debris. Zapkel's mind raced. The implications were staggering. The humans had not just fought the Devourers, they had hunted them, systematically, relentlessly, and they had won. A cold realization settled in his thorax. The humans had not come to the Dominion seeking protection. They had come to judge. On the indomitable, Major Maya Lee watched the alien command nexus through the feed, her expression unreadable. The Zapirians were reacting exactly as predicted. First disbelief, then dawning horror, then the slow, sickening comprehension that their entire understanding of the galaxy was wrong. Beside her, Captain Vala exhaled sharply. They're realizing it now. Lee didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Dominion had spent millennia fearing the Devourers. The humans had spent centuries killing them. Zapkel's secondary eyes flicked to the chrono. Dawn was approaching. The humans had given them a deadline, and every passing second was a tightening noose. His mind replayed the looping transmission, the calm, measured voice of a species that had faced extinction and laughed. We ended them. No rage, no gloating, just fact, a predator's certainty. Quilex finally broke the silence, his voice brittle. They're not just warriors, they're exterminators. Zapkel's spines flattened, and the Dominion had just threatened them. The command spire's crystalline walls pulsed with uneasy light, their usual rhythmic glow, now erratic, flickering between teal and a sickly washed out blue. Zapkel could feel the tension in the air like static before a storm, the very architecture of his ship reacting to the collective dread of its crew. Before him, the holographic display shimmered with the human transmission, still frozen on that final, damning image. The Devourer carcass, the blackened, shattered carapace, the human standing atop it, weapon resting casually against one shoulder, as if it were nothing more than a hunter posing with a trophy. They ended them, the words echoed in his mind, cold and inescapable. Quilex's talons tapped rapidly against the data. Console, his primary eyes narrowed to slits as he sifted through the humans' provided archives. The files were vast, too vast. Decades of warfare compressed into a single data burst, a history of slaughter so thorough it bordered on obscene. Every scan, every battle schematic, every recovered Devourer corpse, dissected and catalogued with clinical precision. Zapkel's secondary eyes tracked the scrolling text, his translator struggling to keep pace. Operation Black Winter, the cleansing of Epsilon. Faye, the siege of Saul's Edge. Names that meant nothing to him, yet carried the weight of 1,000 dead worlds. A flicker, a distortion in the feed. Quilex hissed, his spines flaring as the display stuttered, then resolved into a new image. A battlefield. Not the neat, orderly war. Zones of Dominion doctrine, where fleets clashed at measured distances and honor dictated engagement. The recording was grainy, damaged by radiation and time, but the horror was unmistakable. A Devourer swarm, thousands of them, their chitinous bodies glistening under the light of a dying star, ripping through a human defensive line. Plasma fire lit the darkness in jagged bursts. Human ships burning as they were torn apart. The counterattack. Zapkel's breath caught. Human vessels, smaller than any warship the Dominion fielded, streaked into the fray, not with disciplined formations, but in a frenzy, diving straight into the heart of the swarm. Weapons firing even as their hulls cracked under the strain. One ship, its engines crippled, detonated its core rather than be boarded. The explosion ripping through 3 Devourer carriers in a single suicidal blast. Another recording flickered to life. A planet's surface. A city in ruins. Humans. Unarmored humans. Fighting in the streets. their weapons crude by Dominion standards, their tactics brutal. They fought in packs, dragging wounded comrades back even as Devourer bio. Weapons melted flesh from bone. One human missing half his face, still firing until his weapon overheated. Another impaled through the chest, pulling the pin on an explosive and laughing as the detonation consumed them both. Quilek's voice was barely audible. They don't retreat. Zapkel's claws dug into the console. That was the realization curdling in his gut. The humans hadn't just fought the Devourers. They had matched them, out-savaged them. Where the Dominion had fled, the humans had dug in. Where the Dominion had sought diplomacy, the humans had built better weapons. The transmission ended. The display darkened. Outside the viewports, the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting the human fleet in an eerie blood-orange glow. Their ships were scarred, their armor pitted with the marks of countless battles. Not the sleek, untouched vessels of a young species. The warships of veterans. Zapkel exhaled slowly. The Dominion had miscalculated. The silence in the command spire was thick enough to choke on. Zapkel stood motionless, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically beneath his crystalline skin. The weight of the revelation pressed against his carapace like the gravity of a dying star. The humans. These humans were not the scattered, desperate creatures the Dominion's archives had dismissed. They were something else entirely. Outside, the human fleet hung in the void, their silhouettes jagged and asymmetrical against the soft glow of the system's primary star. Their ships bore the scars of war like badges of honor. Blackened armor plating, patched hull breaches, weapon arrays modified and reinforced in ways that defied standard engineering principles. These were not vessels designed in sterile shipyards by committee. These were warships forged in fire, reshaped by necessity, honed by survival. Quilek's trembling voice shattered the stillness. They knew. Zapkel didn't need to ask what he meant. The humans had known about the Devourers, not as myth, not as some ancient horror buried in forgotten records, but as an enemy they had faced. And beaten, the Dominion had spent centuries erasing the Devourers from history, scrubbing their existence from databases, rewriting their own cowardice into tales of strategic withdrawal. But the humans, they had carved the truth into their bones. A soft chime echoed through the spire. The communication array flickered to life once more, the holographic display resolving into the face of Major Maya Lee. Her expression was unreadable, her dark eyes reflecting none of the triumph Zapkel expected, only weariness and resolve. "You've seen what we can do," she said, her voice stripped of inflection. "Now you know what we've done." Zapkel's mandibles tightened. She wasn't boasting. She wasn't threatening. She was stating a fact. The Dominion had come here to dictate terms, to offer trade, to demand compliance, to fold humanity into the galactic order as just another minor species to be managed. But the humans had other ideas. Lee's gaze never wavered. "We don't want your treaties. We don't need your protection." A pause. "But we will take your help." Zapkel felt the shift in the air, the unspoken ultimatum settling over them like a blade. The Dominion had two choices now. They could walk away, pretend this meeting never happened, let humanity remain an outlier, a rogue variable in their carefully calculated equations, or they could acknowledge the truth that the Devourers were coming back, and the only ones who had ever stood against them, really stood, were the monsters they had once dismissed as savages. Quilek's claws clicked against the console, his bioluminescence dimming with dread. Zapkel exhaled, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Outside, the human fleet waited, and utterly terrifyingly patient. The silence in the command spire was thick enough to choke on. Zapkel's secondary heart pulsed erratically, his crystalline carapace vibrating with the strain of unspoken tension. The holographic display between them still shimmered. Lee's final words, hanging in the air like a blade waiting to fall. "We don't want your treaties, we don't need your protection, but we will take your help." A simple statement, a demand wrapped in the barest veneer of diplomacy. Zapkel's mandibles twitched. The Dominion had spent centuries perfecting the art of control, subtle manipulations, economic leverage, the quiet threat of superior technology. They had never needed to ask for compliance before. And yet here they were. Quilex's bioluminescence flickered in agitation, his neural tendrils coiling tight against his thorax. His claws traced the edges of the data console, the crystalline surface humming beneath his touch. The scans of the human fleet still burned in their archives, the jagged, asymmetrical warships, their armor layered in fractal absorption plating, their weapons arrays wrong in ways Zapirian science couldn't yet parse. And then there were the older records, the ones buried deep in the Dominion's restricted archives, the ones that spoke of them, the Devourers. Zapkel's mind recoiled from the memory, the ancient hollows, twisted, chitinous horrors, their forms shifting like liquid shadow, their ships carving through entire fleets, as if they were nothing. The Dominion had barely survived last time. Whole systems had been scoured to barren rock. And now the humans stood before them, their eyes cold, their stance unyielding, speaking of the Devourers not as myth, but as something they had fought, something they had beaten. The implications sent a tremor through Zapkel's exoskeleton. Outside the viewport, the human fleet loomed. Their vessels were not sleek, not elegant like Zapirian designs. They were brutal, angular things, their hulls studded with weapon ports, their engines burning a harsh, unwavering red. No decorative bioluminescence, no graceful curves, just raw, unapologetic lethality. And they were waiting. Zapkel's neural cluster pulsed with the weight of the decision. If they refused, if they turned away now, what then? Would humanity stand alone against the coming storm? Or would they remember this moment? Remember the Dominion's hesitation when the galaxy's fate hung in the balance? And if they did survive, what would they become? Quilex's voice was barely a whisper, his bioluminescence dim to near. Invisibility. We cannot fight them. Not the humans. Not the Devourers. Zapkel exhaled, his respiratory vents hissing softly. The choice was no choice at all. He activated the comb. Major Lee. His voice carried the weight of inevitability. We will discuss terms. Outside, the human fleet did not cheer, did not react at all. They simply waited, as if they had known the answer all along. The crystalline command chamber of the luminous will hummed with subdued energy, the usual vibrant pulse of its luminescent cores dimmed to a somber teal. Zapkel stood motionless, his segmented carapace absorbing the ambient glow, his neural cluster processing the weight of what had just been decided. Not trade, not alliance. The words settled like a blade between his thoracic plates. Across the holographic display, the human fleet remained, silent, unmoving. Their angular warships, a stark contrast to the Dominion's flowing crystalline architecture. Their engines still burned that same relentless crimson, a color the Zapirians associated with warning, with danger. Quilex shifted beside him, his antennae trembling. The scientist's bioluminescence flickered erratically, betraying his distress. His voice, when it came, was a whisper of static over their neural link. They knew. Zapkel didn't need to ask what he meant. The humans had not been surprised by the Dominion's acquiescence. They had not celebrated, had not even acknowledged the moment with so much as a signal flare. They had simply waited, as if this outcome had been inevitable, as if they had already calculated every possible response and found Zapkel's decision to be the only logical one. A chill seeped through Zapkel's exoskeleton. The Dominion's archives spoke of the Devourers, of their ravenous hunger, their merciless efficiency. But the humans were something else. Not mindless consumption, but precision. Not chaos, but control. And now, they had just been handed the keys to the Dominion's fate. Outside, the void remained still, no retreating engines, No repositioning formations. The human fleet held its ground, their weapons still primed, their stance unyielding. Zapkel's mandibles tightened. This was not surrender. This was realignment. The Dominion had come to offer trade, to extend the hand of civilization to a species they had deemed primitive. The humans had countered with terms, and now, the galaxy would remember which of them had dictated the future. Quilex's bioluminescence pulsed once, a faint, desperate blue. What have we done? Zapkel didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't know. And worse, he wasn't sure the humans did either. Beyond the viewport, the stars burned cold and distant, always waiting. Section Fe. The follow. Up the silence in the command nexus was thicker than the armored plating of the resplendent will. Zapkel's claws flexed against the crystalline control panel. The faint hum of bioluminescent circuits, the only sound. The data streams had stopped updating. The tactical projections had frozen mid-simulation. The humans had not fired. That was the worst part. They had not needed to. Quilex's tendrils twitched as he parsed through the last transmission. Human encryption protocols unraveling before the Dominion's most advanced decryption arrays. The contents were not a demand, not a threat. An invitation. Zapkel's secondary eyes narrowed. The humans had not simply countered the Dominion's trade proposal. They had rewritten it. Their terms were not requests. They were parameters, cold, precise, and unyielding as the void itself. Access to dormant slipstream nodes, full disclosure of Dominion historical archives, joint oversight of former Thalasan territories, and one final line, pulsing at the bottom of the feed like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. Compliance guarantees continued autonomy. Quilex's bioluminescence flickered, his carapace vibrating with suppressed distress. They know about the Thalasans. Zapkel did not react. He didn't need to. The Thalasan Imperium had been extinct for 9,000 cycles. Their ruins littered the outer systems, their monolithic cities now nothing more than shattered husks. Their legacy reduced to cautionary tales whispered in Dominion academies. And yet, the humans had named them. Not as myth, outside, the human fleet remained motionless. Their angular warships silhouetted against the distant glow of the nebula. Their weapons were still active, their shields still humming at full capacity. They were not leaving, they were waiting. For the Dominion's answer, for the realization to sink in. Zapkel's mandibles ground together. The humans had not come as petitioners. They had not come as equals. They had come as arbiters. And the Dominion had just handed them the evidence they needed to prove why. Quilex's voice was barely a whisper. Their records, their archives, they must have access to. Zapkel did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. The command nexus was already drowning in the weight of what they had just uncovered. The humans had not stumbled upon the Thalasans. They had recognized them, and if they knew that, then they knew everything. Beyond the viewport, the human flagship's prow gleamed under the distant starlight, its armor etched with markings too precise to be decoration, too familiar to be coincidence. Zapkel's claws dug deeper into the panel. The Dominion had come to offer trade. The humans had countered with terms, and now the galaxy would learn the truth. That history was not just written by the victors. Sometimes, it was written by the survivors. Section Fe. Zorth's report. The crystalline archives of the Zapirian Dominion had always pulsed with a steady rhythmic light, a visual echo of the data flowing through their living neural networks. But now, as High Commander Zapkel stood before the central databank, the glow was erratic. Flickering, like a heartbeat under strain, his claws hovered over the interface, the bioluminescent tendrils of the console recoiling slightly at his touch. The humans had not just recognized the Thalasans, they had known them. And if their records were accurate, if the fragmented myths of the Dominion's oldest texts held even a sliver of truth, then the galaxy was standing on the precipice of something far worse than war. Zapkel activated the playback. The holographic projection shimmered into existence, casting jagged blue-green shadows across the command nexus. The image was ancient, distorted by millennia of data degradation, but the shape was unmistakable, a vessel, angular and brutal, its hull etched with the same sigils now adorning the human flagship. Log entry, Cycle Feifei. Dominion Science Vessel Lumines. The voice was Zapirian, but the fear in it was universal. We have located the source of the signal. The wreckage is not of any known species. The structural composition suggests a level of metallurgy beyond our own. The energy signatures, static, a hiss of corrupted data. Then, they are not dead, they are waiting. The recording cut abruptly. Zapkel exhaled through his secondary vents, the sound a low, pressurized hiss. The Thalassons had been a cautionary tale, a whispered legend of a civilization so ruthless, so adaptive, that they had waged war against the cosmos itself. The Dominion had assumed them extinct. The humans had proven otherwise. Behind him, Quilex shifted, his crystalline carapace clicking softly. The markings on their ship. They matched the wreckage we found in the dead zone. Zapkel didn't answer. His gaze was locked on the projection, on the sigil now burning in the center of the human vessel's prow. And beneath it, words in a language the Dominion had never deciphered. Until today, the translation matrix flickered, struggling with syntax older than the Dominion itself. Then, with glacial certainty, it resolved. Survivors of the long dark. The air in the nexus grew heavy. The humans had not come to negotiate. They had come to reclaim, and the Dominion, in its arrogance, had handed them the keys to do it. Beyond the viewport, the human fleet waited, their engines humming with a patience that bordered on predatory. History was not just written by the victors. Sometimes, it was written by those who refused to die. The silence in the command nexus was thick enough to choke on. Zapkel's talons flexed against the smooth crystalline surface of the tactical display, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically beneath his carapace. The data streams had stopped updating. The Dominion's fleet, what remained of it, hung in disarray, their formations shattered like glass beneath a hammer. The humans had not just broken their lines, they had rewritten the rules of engagement in fire and steel. Quilex stood motionless beside him, his faceted eyes reflecting the flickering holograms. The scientist's usual hum of analytical curiosity was gone, replaced by something colder, something like dread. Survivors of the long dark. The words coiled in Zapkel's mind, venomous and inescapable. The humans had not just known about the ancient wreckage in the dead zone. They had named it. And that meant they remembered. Beyond the viewport, the human fleet loomed, their ships angular and brutal, where Zapirian vessels were fluid and luminous. The lead dreadnought, indomitable, bore the same sigil as the wreckage, a sword bisecting a circle, the words beneath it now blazing in Dominion script for all to see. Zapkel's mandibles twitched. He had studied human warfare, their history of relentless adaptation. But this was not adaptation. This was inheritance. Quilex finally spoke, his voice brittle. The archive spoke of them. The ones who came before, the ones who burned. Zapkel didn't need the reminder. Every Zapirian child learned the old warnings. The demons who had raised the edges of known space before vanishing into myth. The Dominion had dismissed them as superstition, remnants of some long-forgotten conflict. But the humans had not forgotten. On the tactical display, a new signal pulsed to life. A single vessel, smaller than the others, detached from the human formation and glided forward. Its hull was scarred, its design older than the sleek warships flanking it, yet something about it radiated menace. Quilex's breath hitched. That's Zapkel knew. The ship matched the wreckage in the dead zone perfectly. A survivor. The humans had not just returned. They had brought proof. And as the ancient vessel powered its weapons, systems the Dominion had no record of, no defense against Zapkel, understood the true horror of the moment. The demons of myth had not been erased. They had been waiting, and now they were home. The ancient human vessel hung in the void, like a specter from a forgotten war. Its hull, pitted with scars older than the Zapirian dominion itself, drank in the starlight with a hunger that made Quilex's crystalline skin prickle. The ship was a relic, a ghost, yet its power core pulsed with a slow, deliberate rhythm, like the heartbeat of something long dormant, now awakened. Zapkel's mandibles twitched, his neural tendrils flickering with suppressed dread. The Dominion's archives had spoken of these ships. Their ships, in hushed, fragmented records. Demons, the old texts called them, creators of the dead zones, architects of extinction. The Dominion had dismissed them as myth, the exaggerated fears of a primitive era. But here, now the past was breathing down their necks. The human fleet had not attacked, not yet. Instead, they had sent this one vessel forward, a deliberate choice, a statement. Its weapon ports glowed with an eerie, unfamiliar energy signature, something the Zapirian scanners couldn't classify, couldn't quantify. That alone was a terror. The Dominion had mapped every known form of warfare, every conceivable threat, and yet, this ship hummed with something other. Quilex's data, spines trembled as he parsed the readings. Their power core, it's not just fusion, Therese a secondary system, something layered beneath, like it's alive. Zapkel didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on the human flagship, where Major Maya Lee stood unmoving behind her viewscreen. Her expression was unreadable, but her posture spoke of something the Zapirians had never truly understood about humanity. Patience. Not the patience of prey, waiting for the predator to pass. The patience of a hunter. A chime echoed through the command nexus. A transmission, unencrypted, broadcasting on all frequencies. The humans weren't hiding. They wanted the Dominion to hear. Zapkel hesitated only a moment before accepting. The face that filled the hollow display was not Major Lee's. It was Captain Daniel Vala, his features sharp, his eyes dark, with something that might have been pity or warning. "Zapirian Dominion," he said, his voice calm, measured. "You've seen what we can do. You've seen what we are." A pause. "Now you have a choice." Zapkel's neural tendrils coiled tight. A choice. Not surrender, not submission. The humans had not come for vengeance. They had come to negotiate, and as the ancient vessel's weapons hummed louder in the silence, Zapkel understood the true weight of that offer. The demons of myth had returned, and they were offering terms. The silence in the command nexus was thick, charged with the weight of revelation. Zapkel's neural tendrils pulsed erratically, their usual rhythmic sway disrupted by the sheer enormity of what stood before them. The human warship. Their warship was not just a vessel. It was a relic, a ghost, a thing that should not exist, yet hung in the void like a blade poised above the throat of the Dominion. Quilex's crystalline fingers trembled as they danced across the bioluminescent interface. Scanning, rescanning, as if the data might change. It did not. The readings remained the same. The ship's energy signatures matched the ancient records. The same pulsing, predatory hum that had once sent entire civilizations fleeing into the dark. Demons, the archives had called them. Not a myth, not a legend. And now they had returned. Captain Vala's image remained steady on the hollow display, his expression unreadable. There was no gloating in his stance, no triumph in his voice. Only the quiet certainty of a predator who had already won. "Your ancestors knew ours," Vala said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "They called us monsters, hunters, the ones who did not break." A pause. They were right. Zapkel's mind reeled. The Dominion's history spoke of a time before the Great Silence, when the galaxy had been reshaped by fire and steel. They spoke of a species so relentless, so unyielding, that even the oldest empires had shattered against them. The Dominion had thought them extinct, wiped out by time, by their own brutality. But humans did not die so easily. And now they stood here, Not with demands, but with an offer. Quilex's voice was barely a whisper. They could have destroyed us already. Zapkel knew it was true. The human ship's weapons were primed, its systems humming with lethal potential. One command, and the Dominion fleet would be reduced to molten debris. Yet the humans had not fired. They had waited. Because this was not about destruction. It was about legacy. Vala's gaze never wavered. We don't want your surrender. We don't want your fear. His lips curled just slightly. We want you to remember. A transmission flickered across the hollow. Display, an archive file, ancient and encrypted. Zapkel's tendrils twitched as the data streamed in, unfolding like a nightmare-given form. Entire fleets burning in the void, and at the center of it all, humans. Not as victims, not as prey, as conquerors. Quilex's breath hitched. They ruled. Zapkel's mind burned with the implications. The Dominion had built its empire on the bones of the past, believing themselves the pinnacle of power. But the humans had been here first. They had walked these stars long before the Dominion's crystalline spires had pierced the sky, and they had not come back to reclaim what was lost. They had come to ensure it was never forgotten. Vala's voice was soft, final. The terms are simple. You acknowledge the truth. You cease your expansion into systems that were once ours. And in return, a pause. We let you live. The silence that followed was absolute. Zapkel looked at the human warship, at the weapon ports still glowing with restrained power. They had no choice. Not really. But perhaps that was the point. With a slow, deliberate motion, Zapkel activated the comb. Terms accepted. The holo display flickered once before dissolving into static, and as the human ship turned away, its engines flaring like a dying star, Zapkel understood one thing with perfect clarity. The demons had not returned to rule. They had returned to remind the galaxy what fear truly was, and in that moment, the Dominion learned.